Okay. Welcome back from lunch. I hope your bellies are full, and encourage everyone just to take a moment of appreciation again that we have access to clean water, good food, and I don't think Mina's in the room, but Brad's wife takes care of all the catering, so we'll have to thank her when she comes back. So we're now moving into the afternoon session, and it's my deepest honor and pleasure to welcome Sona Khosla to the stage, who always gives such a warm and inspirational presentation. So welcome, Sona.
Hi, everyone. It is nice to kind of see you. I'm just going to say I'm moving really slow, so if I look awkward or pain, it's because I hurt my leg, and I did that walking, so welcome to being over 45. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here, especially after lunch when you're all probably going to fall asleep. But I just want to say before I start, I was at the Calgary gathering earlier this year. How many of you were there? Yeah, it was so great. I am honestly telling you, it was the highlight of my year in terms of conferences that I've been to, because it was the most optimistic room that I've been in. So I'm really glad to be back here in Toronto. Huge kudos to who I want to call Blair, but it's Brad and Claire, of course, for bringing us all together again. So today I'm going to share some of our latest research. It's called the Grants Confidence Gap. And this is a research report that just launched 6 days ago. So this is my first public presentation of this data, so you'll have to tell me how it feels. But before I get started, I'll just quickly introduce myself. I am Sona Khosla. I'm Chief Impact Officer at Benevity. So I have the privilege of doing what a lot of the corporate people in the room get to do, which is lead our corporate purpose programs. So for me, that's inclusive of ESG, climate, and social impact. And then I work with other teams to run our DEI strategy and our values and ethics work. But another aspect of my role, which is really exciting, is heading up our social innovation lab, which is called Benevity Impact Labs. And the lab has a mission of accelerating impact and inclusion through 3 key areas. One is a focus on innovation. The second one is bringing proprietary research and data, which you will see today. And then the third one is by convening leaders to talk about what's happening on the fuzzy front end of impact and inclusion. And so it's a little bit like what we're doing today, is bringing people to reimagine what's happening out there. So I realize maybe some of you don't know Benevity. I think most of you do. So I'll just make this really quick. We are a Calgary-based company. I think sometimes people don't know that. So proudly Canadian. And we offer the most comprehensive all-in-one global enterprise impact platform. So we really like to think of ourselves as an organization's purpose at work, helping companies and nonprofits drive more good more simply. And here's just a smattering of the outcomes that the Benevity community, so people like you, have generated in just the past year. And I think these results really just show how much goodness we can create when we do it together and in partnership. And these outcomes are estimated by our partners at Impact Genome using their registry benchmarks. Before I jump into our latest research, I always love just taking a moment to share some data from Canadian headquartered organizations who are supporting positive outcomes, because I know people like to see what's happening in Canada sector-wide. So why don't we jump into a little bit of that? So what you can see first is that a lot of you stepped up and donated a lot of money, $195 million through our platform in the last year, which was an 11% year-over-year increase. Volunteer hours climbed to 3 million, which was an 8% increase. But this is the next one you'll see is actually where we saw the most substantial increase, and that was in grants, almost a 20% increase year over year. And then what you'll see next is there were 43,000 nonprofits supported by Canadian headquartered people and their employees, which is clear that you value choice in the organizations that you support. And then here at home, what you'll see is 23,000 nonprofits based in Canada were supported, which is up 9% year over year. So this is really remarkable growth. I think sometimes it feels like we're not feeling growth. It feels like we're a little stalled and stuck, but there is growth happening and there is goodness happening. Okay, so let's get to the research. I'm going to jump into the results of our latest study. And from what we can tell, there is no other study like this out in the market, so maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. I think we'll find out, but I'm really looking forward to hearing from you today. So let's start by looking at how grant making feels these days. Anyone else feel like the little red ball? Does anyone? Yeah? Sisyphus? It feels Sisyphean. And perhaps it also feels like in the last year that blue ball's gotten bigger or heavier. There's definitely more scrutiny from corporate leaders. There are tenuous budgets. We've seen reductions in a number of companies, overstretched teams, competition and pressure everywhere, more due diligence, more risk management, more reporting, more attestations. It's getting pretty intense. And we publish another report every year called the State of Corporate Purpose Report. It's our annual trends report. And so from that data, what we know is that we are also in what we're calling a massive corporate purpose shakeup. So according to our data, almost 2/3 of companies have changed their corporate purpose strategy in the last year. And significantly changed it, which definitely has had a knock-on effect on grant-making strategies and partnerships, which some of you have probably felt. But on top of that, more than half have experienced a departmental or leadership change. And so that's a lot of change at the upper echelons of an organization. It's change with who you're working with, who they're working with, how decisions are made. And all the while, you're still trying to complete some monumental tasks together. Okay, but now I'm going to show you the most stunning insight that we discovered in our latest study. So 74% of organizations that we surveyed are executing best practices in grant making. So that is amazing. That's really mature. But just over half, 51%, report that they feel that they're doing it well. So that's not the metric of success that we want. And so this is what we're calling the grants confidence gap. And what this staggering statistic comes from is something called the Benevity Impact Index. So this is a proprietary tool that we developed that allows corporate impact teams to assess what and how they're doing on a variety of impact-related practices. So there's 102 questions in the index, and 34 of those questions are related to grant making specifically. And then across those questions, leaders answer if they do it and if they feel they do it well. And so to create this report, we analyzed data from 120 organizations across 17 different industries all over the world with a mix of CSR and foundation-led grant making. And the results are super fascinating. And so what we did was we summarized the results by plotting them on this 2x2 graph that you're going to see frequently through this presentation. So let me give you a little tour. The x-axis along the bottom is the percentage of companies that reported that they are doing this practice. And then the y-axis going vertically is the percentage of companies that reported doing it well. And so what we did was we plotted the practices along 4 main themes that our questions covered. So the first one was strategic alignment and execution, stakeholder engagement and impact, innovation and adaptability, and communication. Okay, so those are the themes, and then what we did was we grouped them into zones. So the first zone is practices that are common and done well. So those are the ones that are in the top right quadrant. And then we've got in the bottom right quadrant practices that are common but with lower success rates. And then in the bottom left, you've got those with just low investment from grant makers. And then the top left is low investment but high potential. Okay, so I know this is the kind of graph that happens when you leave like a social data science researcher to plot all of your data. But just bear with me, I promise we will make sense of this together. But if you just take a glance at this, what you can see is A, grant-making teams are busy. They are doing a lot. A high percentage of companies are doing a lot of the practices. And we see that with all of the dots on the right side of the graph. But just over half of the dots are above the center line, which is what we're calling the confidence gap. Teams are active, but they aren't confident that they're doing things well. So what we're going to do is break these down by theme just to see what learnings there are for us to glean from the data. So let's start with theme 1. It is strategic alignment and execution. Okay, so now I'm just showing the dots related to the practices on this theme. So that's what you see on the graph here. And what we're seeing, again, is a high level of activity in strategic alignment and execution, generally high confidence. They're all mostly above the middle line. There's only one practice that falls below the average confidence line, and I'm sure you're wondering what that is. I will definitely touch on it. But first, I just wanted to share an interesting phenomena that we discovered in the high confidence practices in the top right. So let's start there. So almost every organization said that they had the key supports in place for a successful grant-making program. So 99% said that their executive teams value their corporate impact programs. 99% said that they have the budget to sustain their programs. And 86% said that their budget is secure annually. So that is fantastic. But when we started to peel back the layers, the underlying data showed a slightly more tenuous situation. Of the 99% that said that their executives value the program, only 63% said that they feel they do it well, which means a third of them lack the confidence that they're doing it in a way that can ensure that they can keep the executive commitment in place. And then when it comes to budget, only 66% are confident that their budget is sustainable, again, revealing some underlying uncertainty for about another 1/3. So this is what we're also kind of terming the mirage of alignment, right? All of the key supports are in place, but teams don't necessarily feel that those supports are there to stay. Our data also shows a disconnect between local and global grant making. So 99% of the organizations said, yeah, we support local causes and emergencies. 87% said that they make place-based investments. Makes a ton of sense to us. We were not surprised by this at all. But let's take a look at global grant making. So 75% of organizations extend their grant making globally, and only 35% say that they do it well. And I'll be honest, this was also not that surprising to us because global grant making, for those of you in the room who do it, you know it is not easy. Regional nuances and regulatory requirements, cultural nuances and understanding, the cost of recruiting and maintaining local resources and expertise, and the risks of maybe not doing things in the way that they should be done in a specific jurisdiction are pretty high. But there are many ways that companies are executing really well, bringing in local expertise, using their local boards or councils or ERGs or even their impact program champions or volunteer ambassadors. And then I would also say that most companies who had higher confidence really have reliance on partners like whether it's Benevity or other tech platforms because we really help manage a lot of the regulatory requirements, but also help consolidate a lot of the reporting across different jurisdictions to give a holistic picture and manage that application and reporting process across the world. So if you're interested in talking about global grant making, we've got some geeky Benevityites who are happy to talk to you about that. But let's return to our data now. So let's talk about theme 2. So this is around stakeholder engagement and impact. So here's the dots. Across the board, questions related to stakeholder engagement had actually some of the lowest do it well scores in the entire self-assessment, with all but one practice falling below the average confidence level. So the opposite of what we just saw with the other themes. So let's take a deeper look into this area. So as you can see, there's a very big confidence gap in core practices like strategic partnerships and in-kind donations. And then there's relatively lower participation in things like ERG-directed funds or employee-nominated grants, but they have decently higher confidence levels. So to expand on this further, 74% of organizations reported that grant-making decisions are influenced by stakeholders like employees or customers. But shockingly, only 35% said that they're confident that they do this well. So this is a 39% confidence gap, and it was one of the starkest in our data. Just curious, I'm just gonna put my sunglasses on here. Show of hands, how many of you feel like this statistic might actually speak to you? Yeah, some of you. I mean, I wouldn't be shy about it. It's really common, obviously. So this tells us that the mechanisms that are in place are there, but are we really maximizing these efforts? And so when we look at some of the tactics that are used, things like measuring the nonprofit experience or aligning with business goals or effectively communicating impact, they're still very much a work in progress for most grant-making teams. So if you're in that bucket, you should feel okay. In some cases, we also hear grant makers asking themselves who really is qualified and useful in that engagement process. Sometimes more voices don't lead to better decisions. Regardless, it's clear that there's opportunity to strengthen confidence in the practices of in this category of stakeholder engagement and impact. Okay, time for theme 3, which is around innovation and adaptability, and this is honestly my favorite category because it exposes some really cool findings that I know our nonprofit partners are going to feel seen. So what's fascinating here is that the practices represented by these dots hover much more around that center line, indicating that most practices in this category demonstrate a slightly higher than average confidence level than in other categories. So let's look at some of the practices that fall under this theme. So 61% of respondents offer unrestricted grants. 56% say they do it well. 65% streamline applications, 53% say they do it well. And 62% minimize reporting burdens on grantees, and 51% say they do it well. And so when you kind of take a step back and look at what these practices, there's something they all have in common. Of course, they're all tenets of trust-based philanthropy. And I assume everyone's aware of what trust-based philanthropy is. Just in case you don't, of course, it's the shifting of the balance of power in the, between funders and grantees to make it more equitable and more collaborative. So what this data, when we kind of zoom out from it, what it tells us is that when organizations embrace the principles of trust-based philanthropy, they have higher confidence levels. And we think that's really a powerful promotion for trust-based philanthropy, told by the data. So we had our recent episode of our podcast, Speaking of Purpose. If you haven't checked it out, feel free to check it out. I got to interview AJ Jordan, who is the head of community stewardship and the president of the Vanguard Foundation, as well as Jenny Begoni, who's chief of community engagement and public programs at the Free Library of Philadelphia Foundation. And here's just a clip where Jenny is describing her relationship with AJ as a funder.
Tell me a bit about how the relationship has actually worked from your vantage point.
It's been the best relationship I've ever had with a funder. And, you know, I don't say that just to pat AJ's back. I really mean that. He's not lying. You know, the minute I was hired into this role, he was on the phone saying, "What do you need? We're here to make you successful." And he took me to events. He suggested places I need to be. He introduced me to people around town. You know, and someone once said to me, it's not who you know, it's who introduced you to who you know. And I think that is true, right? It's different for me to email someone and say, can I come meet with you? I'd like to talk to you about this incredible initiative we're doing to increase literacy. But, oh, AJ's introducing you. I know AJ, I trust AJ. You know, Philadelphia, we're talking about Philadelphia. Philadelphia's a city of relationships. And a lot of Philadelphia runs on who your people are and what networks you're in. And so having a funder who was introducing me and opening those doors and kind of giving me the good housekeeping seal of approval and, you know, Jenny's good people doing good things meant everything in terms of kickstarting the work. So we've had a relationship that's been much more of a partnership than a funder-grantee relationship from day one. There have been multiple times throughout Read by Fourth's trajectory where I've called AJ and said, I'm stuck. Like, I don't know what to do about this. And it has nothing to do with how to get funding. It was more of a kind of political small p, I don't know how to maneuver next. And, you know, AJ was one of the people I could call and he would think through it with me, right? And to be able to be that transparent with the funder about what the challenges are in front of you and know that your funding wasn't at risk if you were being vulnerable was critical.
Yeah, and I want to pick up on that thread, Sona, because I think that's important in philanthropy. Sometimes you can't, what gets in the way of positive change and impact is that power dynamic that exists, right? And you don't want to be vulnerable or feel like you don't have the answer to something because that could, next cycle I might lose dollars for this important issue, so I'll just keep it to myself. Well, real partnership and relationship building is about that vulnerability on both sides, because none of us has like the golden answer.
So I'll cut AJ off there, but I really feel like they get at the vulnerability that's needed to build trust in a relationship. And I can tell you, being in the room and watching them interact with each other, you can see how authentic that trust and relationship is on both sides. So definitely encourage you to check out that episode. It's rich with dialogue and insights, and it's very instructive on how you can build really powerful partnerships. So the final theme that emerged from the data is a big one, and it's around communication. And so I'm sure we all inherently know how important communication is for corporate impact programs. So check this out. Just look at the number of practices that fall well below the average confidence level in this theme. That's wild, especially considering how many folks come from communications backgrounds into these roles. So let's dig in a little bit. So 91% of respondents share the impact of their corporate impact program internally. Only 48% say they do it well. 88% share impact externally. Only 47% say they do it well. And 62% communicate long-term impact with data to employees. Just 41% do it well. So that last point is especially important because what we see here is that grant-making teams are really good at communicating their activity or their outputs, but are falling short when it comes to communicating impact. And I know this is a long-standing discussion in the philanthropic space, so I'm not going to pretend that I'm saying anything new or necessarily groundbreaking here. But for a moment, let's just talk about impact reporting, because it feels like it's a lot like this image, right? Everyone kind of doing their own thing, going their own way, and oftentimes nonprofits are asked to fill out long surveys or report on their impact in a very structured way that enables a corporate to tell their story, which is very custom to them, which I totally get. We as corporate people need to prove that we are generating the outcomes that the company is investing in. But there's a lot of shifts going on in this space, and the biggest shift I see is that companies are really starting to relinquish their firm grasp on their definitions of impact, and they're starting to adopt standardization. And so there's this move towards a much more unified approach. And so here's some more data from our annual trends report, State of Corporate Purpose, which I mentioned earlier, which highlights this trend. So we saw that 63% of companies globally are considering adopting standardized measures, but when it comes to Canadian companies, that number increases to 79%. So that is amazing. It's almost 80% of companies doing that, which makes me personally very proud as a Canadian. And I know, standardization's been a loaded term in our industry for a long time. It's really hard to find that balance between, balancing strategy to corporate and flexibility with grantees. So the fact that the vast majority of Canadian companies are exploring this, I think, is very encouraging. From that same report, State of Corporate Purpose, we did also identify how large enterprises are thinking about lifting the burden to measure and communicate impact. So whether it's paying nonprofits for measurement or foregoing specific customized asks for at least some of their programs, or supporting nonprofits in developing the skills to measure their impact. And so just last week, we dropped another episode of our podcast with Chiru Adesnik. She is the executive director of the Cisco Foundation. And 10 years ago, Cisco set out on this big audacious goal to positively impact 1 billion lives. And when you set a goal like that, one of the first questions that comes to mind is, well, how are you going to measure that? That's a pretty big, vague goal. So in this conversation, Chiru talked about how engaging nonprofits was core to that process. And that for the most part, they really felt that their grantees were doing actually a very good job of evaluating impact. But here was some other ways that Cisco went further to support their grantees. So let's listen to Chiru.
Impact evaluation is expensive and it's time consuming. And every funder wants to see impact, but people aren't, funders aren't always willing to invest in that. So we have always said, we will fund a line item in a grant budget to support impact evaluation. We also have, our in-house team who will work with our nonprofit partners to help them think through, what might impact evaluation look like. On the one end, the gold standard obviously is randomized controlled trials. But what are other ways that we can work with you to identify some of those, like we talked about before, some of those interim KPIs that give you a sense of, are you moving in the right direction? Is the trajectory, are you on course? And then see some of that longer term impact. So I think that was another important learning for us, was really investing in nonprofit organizations to support impact evaluation.
So I'm sure some of the nonprofits in the room are going to be looking up Cisco's granting program, but they did achieve and actually exceed their big audacious goal by positively impacting 1.1 billion lives 1 year early. And their third-party auditors agreed, so a pretty arduous process. Okay, so now we come back to this lovely 2x2 graph that I'm sure you've missed, to once again see that we are doing a lot, but not always reporting confidence in everything we're doing. And as we were combing through the data, identifying themes that were really popping to us, and thinking about this confidence gap, there was one unifying word that really came to mind when we were thinking about how we close this gap. And the word is stewardship. And at the risk of stating the obvious, stewardship in grant-making teams really means creating the conditions for programs and partnerships to grow over time. In practice, what it means is that corporate leaders should be focusing on clarifying how programs and partnerships strategically align with business goals, building trusted and I would say vulnerable relationships with nonprofits, so respecting their capacity, understanding their constraints, and working with them on grant making to make it as seamless as possible. And then I would say leading with the business, within the business, with the acumen that they would if they were making any other kind of investment in product, in a process or partnership. And so ideally when stewardship becomes the focus of grant-making programs, then nonprofits are better equipped to plan, scale, and deliver on the impact that is being sought in the first place. And then internally in a corporate organization, it becomes so much easier to align across teams and maintain priorities and demonstrate that the value goes well beyond just the grant itself and supports the overall business goals. And so in this way, we really started to think about stewardship not just as a principle, but as a strategy. So that's a lot of data after lunch. I hope you're still awake. Are you still with me? Yeah. Awesome. Okay, great. So if you're interested in getting the full report, you can scan the QR code here. I believe that the report is also in the app. And if you're interested in us presenting this to your teams or getting a look at how it actually applies directly to your team and taking the Benevity Impact Assessment, just feel free to reach out to any of us. I'm Sona. We've got a few Benevityites here as well who you can find in the app. And then I'll just say, if you love data and you want more data, feel free to either follow myself or Benevity. We share a ton of data on LinkedIn. And just one last plug to subscribe to the podcast. There's some great episodes. We just launched season 4 and a ton of rich content there that's quite inspiring and instructive. So thank you for today. Yeah.